Mr. Arnold.
I'm here.
Ms. Banks. Ms. Bell. Here. Mr. Brown.
Present.
Ms. Carter. Here. Ms. Clark. Here. Ms. Friedman.
Here.
Reverend Gordon.
Shannon Hitch, board staff.
Tina Mason, board staff.
Ann Feinstein, Unison.
Faith Gulliver, board staff.
Juanita Helbig Sanford, board staff.
Thank you to all of you. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the April 2nd meeting. Are there any objections, corrections, additions?
In local levy revenue, we are at 99.8% of our budget for the fiscal year. And I expect that to remain that way throughout the rest of the fiscal year. In the federal revenue, we are under budget by about 1.4 million, and that is mostly due to the state opioid and stimulant response grant. We finally have some of that rolling through, and we did draw about 600,000 of that at the end of March, and we had another about 150,000 that we were ready to draw in April. So it will catch up, I think, mostly. It's probably going to have some underspending, but it's catching up just slow. In the state revenue, underspending there is still consistent with what it has been, mostly to the Access to Wellness grant. That was about 400,000 in underspending. And then in the expenditures line, the grant funded program expenses, we see that also being consistent. Most of that is due to the state opioid and stimulant response and the Access to Wellness grants. And then for the month of March, we had a decrease in net assets of about $3.6 million. On the next page, on the balance sheet on page 7, the decrease of $3.9 million in cash was mostly due to our grant payments in the month of March. And then we also had significant state opioid and stimulant response payments go out in the month of March as well. And then in the accounts receivable, we had a draw into the city of Toledo for our ARPA grants. So that's that $179,000 that you see in March. And then you'll also notice a new line under other assets for security deposit that is on our new office space, that $55,974. And then at the end of March, our non-designated board fund balance was at $15.9 million. There are payments on pages 8 through 11 and a motion on page 5.
Any questions for Jenny about the financials? We have a motion on the bottom of page 5. Anybody inclined to support that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Jenny, you're up again.
And the write-up for the next section starts on page 12. And I'm going to direct you to the actual numbers on pages 14 through 17. So this is our main funding that we do every year. So this is all of our main programs and services that we fund on our fiscal year. I brought to you in April our preliminary for, if you're looking at pages 14 15, and the very top of 16. That I presented to you in April as a preliminary. There are just a few minor changes from that, from what I brought to you in April. A few 2% increase changes, but for the most part, that is consistent with what I presented to you in April. The next section on page 16 is titled Non-Certified Agency Allocations. You also probably sometimes hear us refer to that as board designated. Those are, the top section are non-certified agencies. The bottom ones that say MHRSB next to them are driven by us internally spending those funds. So I'm going to just highlight a couple of those. On the Guardianship Services Board, you'll see an increase there from $305,000 to $335,000. We presented that to you back, I believe, in January. The increase, and they actually run on a calendar year. So you actually previously approved January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. So you actually have already approved half of that allocation, 167.5. We continued that increased amount through the remainder of the fiscal year. So we did 167,500 times 2 to get 335,000 for fiscal year 25. I'm going to stop there and make sure everyone understands that.
The write-up for these are on page 12, right, Jenny?
Yes.
The actual,
Yes.
if you want to follow the actual, how it was. what's
The Guardianship Board had an increase
Yeah.
at the beginning of calendar year 2024. I carried that into calendar year 2025 because we don't know it yet. And you actually have already approved the first half of our fiscal year 25 because it falls under calendar year 24.
So that's half of the increase because they're on a calendar year and we're on a July 1, June 30. Is that right?
Half of the allocation, I basically just doubled. So what the allocation was for their calendar year, I took the second half of the year and I just doubled it to make it our fiscal year. So if you think of it in 3 sections,
Got it.
first half was January through June that we're in right now. Then there was July through December of 2024. I took that amount and I just doubled it to get us our next fiscal year.
So we're basically agreeing to duplicate
Yes.
their calendar, their 2024 calendar year increase.
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, if things change, we'll come back to you and bring you something different.
But the allocation shown here for FY 2025 is based on our fiscal year.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct, yes. And because they run on a calendar year, we will have to come back to you in January for the actual contract anyways.
That will have
It's very
increased
confusing.
amount.
It's very confusing. Yes, yes,
Are they also funded by probate?
yes.
Yeah, there's a small amount that goes from probate, and the Department of Developmental Disabilities also matches our amount, or we match theirs, since I think they did it first.
All right, so I'm going to move on then. The next section that I wanted to highlight there was our health equity funds. Health equity continues to be a priority for us, but we're going to continue our fiscal accountability, and we've discussed internally what some of our major projects are going to be for next year, and we have several small and medium-sized project plans, but we don't have any major projects planned for next fiscal year. So we have a budget in there with a decrease of $35,000 for health equity for next fiscal year, from $335,000 to $300,000. And then in the CIT budget, we have a decrease from $20,000 to $15,000, and that is mostly just due to, in that program, we've done a really great job of reaching out for additional grants from NAMI Ohio, and that has offset most of our costs the last several years. So we're hoping that continues, and we're going to continue to maintain where we are with our costs. So we have a proposed budget in there of $15,000 for CIT for fiscal year 25.
Is that only for police, that training, or is it for who? The CIT training?
It is not.
So
I'll
it's
let you answer
for
that.
law enforcement personnel and related. So you can have a probation officer, for
Okay.
instance, or law enforcement. We've had park rangers, we've had 180th Fire Wing MPs, correctional treatment facility staff, corrections law enforcement type. We've done Mercy, Police Department, and some others.
Is it a requirement for their training, CIT?
There are no requirements for trainings, but we do have a lot of support from law enforcement.
Yeah. Especially with the
The fact that we're reducing the budget doesn't mean that we're going to reduce the amount of
Correct,
training.
correct,
Right.
absolutely.
offset
Yep.
by grants.
Correct. Correct. And then the next one that I wanted to highlight with the change is community engagement, and that we are requesting to go from 25,000 to 35,000 for fiscal year '25. And that is really just to account for the rising costs of the programs and our community engagement. It's just what we do with our community engagement just isn't possible under 25,000 anymore. So if you take those three together that I just laid out, a decrease in health equity of 35,000 and a decrease in CIT of 5,000, and then you offset that with an increase of 10,000 in community engagement, it still is a net decrease of 30,000 in the board directed funds, which we're taking very seriously the fact that we need to reduce our budgets. So that is the non-certified agency allocation section, which we also sometimes refer to as board designated. The section below that on page 16.
Question,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry.
Just, could you define what the mental health first aid is? I mean, just, maybe I know, but I don't know.
Oh, I'll be happy to take care of that. Mental health first aid is an evidence-based training that we provide to the community on a routine basis. It's 8 hours in length, and it helps individuals in our community, just general citizens, identify signs and symptoms of potential suicide, and then educates that individual on how to appropriately address what they're seeing with that individual, and then also knowledge about how to make referrals into our system and how to support that person.
Who disseminates that service? Who oversees that
So
service?
our training department, Latrice, does the training, but we also have, I don't even know how many anymore, 30, 40 people trained in.
We have 26 people.
26 people trained in mental health first aid. We try and offer that to, just general community members, and then whatever other entities might need that service.
We took advantage of it as an organization and sent a team member, and it's proven to be worth every minute she spent here. So really appreciate it.
And it's free to the community, correct?
It's free to the community. We normally, there's a cost to the books because you have to buy them through mental health first aid, whatever the parent organization is. I think they're $25 for the workbook per person. And then if they do an 8-hour session, they usually have, if you don't have a free room, which normally you might, you also provide a lunch.
Do we do any outreach to groups to inform them of this service? The one thing that comes to mind for me would be clergy.
Well, we're doing a tremendous amount of outreach and conversation with clergy. And in fact, we're just about to partner with the Ohio Suicide Prevention Coalition to do outreach to clergy. But a lot of clergy have taken advantage of our mental health first aid, not just this year, but in the last several years. Sponsored with IMA or UPSI or one of those groups.
I think that you've done an incredible job in getting information to faith-based organizations. Somebody who's been tied to religious organizations pretty much all of my life. The progress is significant. So, and I see y'all at IMA all the time.
Yep, Michael and his team are always there.
They're there. Yeah.
And UPSI as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We see Michael everywhere.
So,
And we appreciate that.
question, can you give me an idea of what the reduction of the $35,000 will mean to health equity programming and services?
So I'm going to start and then I'll let you finish if you want. In fiscal year '24, I told you that we had planned underspending as part of our cost reduction efforts. So we did. And then in fiscal year '25, we had a lot of conversations about what some of the major projects were going to be coming up. And we don't have anything large planned coming up, but we do have several smaller and medium-sized projects coming up. So the impact on that is not necessarily significant because the small and medium-sized projects are not gonna, you know what I mean? It's not going to be.
What kind of projects are
Yeah,
involved?
right.
Michael, you want to
jump
take
in on
this?
this?
I didn't hear the first question, sorry.
What kind of projects are we talking about with health equity right now?
Health equity projects, so one of the things with health equity that we're noticing is that we have begun to do a good job of intertwining health equity into our other lines of business and within the organization. So one of the bigger things that we looked at before is when you're first rolling out health equity, you need a larger budget. Whereas now we don't need quite as much because you're seeing it show up in marketing, you're seeing it show up in community engagement, you're seeing it show up but where we're buying vendors services from. So for example, the Credio contract will be a great example of that. That Credio contract used to be against part of our health equity budget, whereas now we've moved that to marketing because now we're showing our marketing budget being used a little bit differently than we would have shown it before, because we don't have to show you that it's directly coming from health equity anymore to kind of pin that we're doing health equity. You know we're doing health equity by the way we're doing it. You see it now in the way we're having events. So some of the events that we have coming up, like they just mentioned, projects with the Ohio Suicide Foundation. We were in discussions with, I forget the name of the organization that's doing Just Heal Girl, which is a CAN project for African American males. We've talked with the NAACP and passed it again more recently about projects and things we can do coming up here in the future. We support the African American Leadership Fellowship and the Latino Alliance Fellowship with their conferences. And then you see us at the IMA events and the revivals, and we're sponsors for all of those events. And that's kind of where we're turning our attention now. How do we become more ingrained into our community? And how do we push that through our natural community engagement and not have to spend as much money doing certain projects? We have increased some of the things that we're doing as it relates to language and making sure that Proprio is available, right? But now we don't have to carry the system for Proprio. So you don't need as much money set aside for that. So those are some of the things that you're starting to see, and we're starting to look at accessibility. Looking at our website, one of the projects we just talked about is making sure we have text to word to text. So, you know, when you go to a website now, they're scribing what's on the text. We don't have that on our website now. It's something we've got to look at, but that's not going to cost $300,000, right? Because we already have revamped the site. So we've done a lot of that groundwork, and now we just need to implement just some tweaks in terms here and there. Hope that long answer answered it.
Well, you know, and I just want to interject a congratulations, because when we were working on the DEI and B strategic plan, the whole idea was that would never, that at some point it would all merge, because that's just the way we do business, right. Period, across the board. That, yeah, so I think congratulations, because I think we're seeing that merger starting to happen, and that's huge in such a really short period of time.
Yeah, and so one of your points,
congratulations to
we can
them.
barely hear you back here, right? It's hard to hear back here. So one of those projects is us working on accessibility, so there's a speaker back here so that we can hear. And we actually have coming the hearing impaired devices. They're on the way, right? At some point here soon, so that if you're hearing impaired, you'll be able to hear. So that's all the places where we're putting money, but those again are just upgrades to systems we've already have in place and things that's already built.
And it still leaves room for us to do major project if something comes up.
I guess I would just encourage that, because we are role models and trendsetters, that we not integrate it into our system to the extent that we're not preaching the importance of health equity, and that we are doing it, because there's such a push to eliminate equity
Right.
these days, that I just don't want it to get lost
Sure.
to the public, to the community, to our stakeholders, and to our service providers, that it is at the forefront of us, and that we're spending money and efforts to accomplish it.
That's a good point.
That is, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions for Jenny? Jenny, did you need to, did
Yeah.
you want to say anything about the bottom of 16 or the top of 17?
Yeah, I'll make that quick.
Okay.
So the bottom of 16 has additional Ohio Loss allocations, and you can see there on fiscal year 25, they're all zeros. Those were all proposed in the Ohio 120-day notice process to our agencies and approved. Those all come directly from Ohio Moss, and we don't know those allocations yet for next fiscal year. So that's why they're all zeros. If we get those funding for next fiscal year, we'll bring that back to you. On page 17 is our pass-throughs, strictly pass-through from Ohio Moss. And again, we don't know those amounts from them yet either. We anticipate them to be consistent with fiscal year 24 amounts. That section is information only because in accordance with our policy, you do not have to approve that. So there are motions on page 12 and 13. And because of potential conflicts of interest, we have tasks separate in the first motion, and then we have the Warner Center separate, and then we have the remainder together on the top of page 20, on top of page 13 for $20 million.
Any other questions, comments, discussions about this very important topic before we vote? All right, let's take the three motions just as they're laid out. Is there a motion to approve the $271,000 for task?
So moved. Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Show me as abstaining, please. Is there a motion to approve the $1,515,000 to the Warner Center at the bottom of page 12? Is there a second?
Abstain.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Show me as
Abstain.
an abstention, please.
And Brian as well.
And then on the top of page 13 is the big Megillah. Anybody want to move for that?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any further discussion? This is the heart of what we do, folks. This is important stuff. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Jenny, you got your money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's get the next one too.
Technically, the next one's really her money.
Okay. We're now on to item 7, and it's again to Jenny.
This one is our administrative budget, and that is on page 20. The write-up for it is on pages 18 and 19. So you'll see, if you look at page 20, the first column is our approved fiscal year 24 budget. The next column is fiscal year 24 year-to-date through the end of March. And then the third column in is our proposed 25 administrative budget. And you'll see at the very bottom there, it totals $3,018,679. And then on the column on the right is the change from fiscal year 25, well, from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25. So there are, I'm just going to preface this by saying there are a lot of changes in and out with these from fiscal year 24 for various reasons. Most of it is related to our ITP project, Infrastructure Transformation Project. So a lot of costs that we have had that have been stable for many years are changing. And so I'm going to go through some of the highlights, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. But it's kind of heavy in detail, so I'm going to try to keep it light for you. Starting with salaries, we have that in at our current table of organization, 23 full-time employees with 3% increases based on performance. In the, I'm going to jump down to the health insurance line. That shows a decrease, but we actually have built in a 10% increase. The decrease is shown because in fiscal year '24, we had budgeted for several of our new employees to be taking a family plan, but they actually took a single plan, so it was significantly cheaper. Going down to the rent, this accounts for a full year of our increased rent in our new space, so an increase of $91,000 there. On the equipment line, you see it going from $60,000 down to $15,000. So there's a couple different things in that line. Originally in fiscal year '24, that budget started at $20,000. We increased it to provide for equipment for this space.
Oh.
So we do not have that built into the '25 budget. And then in addition, in fiscal year '24, that line had equipment, physical equipment, but also IT equipment, so computers, that kind of thing. That is built into a line below the professional services miscellaneous because it's part of our ITP project. So we're reducing that to account for that as well. That's why we're taking it essentially from $20,000 to $15,000 because now we basically have it just for physical equipment. On the professional services consultants line, that has been for the last several years Montgomery County Board doing our claims processing. That is transitioning from them to Streamline. You have already approved Montgomery County to continue their contract through November, so those funds are built in there through November. You also have already approved for us to be working with Streamline through the end of January. So Streamline started in fiscal year '24. We have a full year of it built into our budget for fiscal year '25, but you've already approved through January of it. I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
Just to try to get an apples to apples comparison on the salary line, do you know what the FTEs were for the '24 budget?
It was also 23,
Was it?
but we had several open positions.
Right.
But it was 2 months late too, right? Because we approved it in August 23.
Correct.
Yes.
So it would have been 10 months of fiscal year.
10 months, okay.
On the salaries, are there any comparative studies done?
We did the comparative study when we did the revision of the table of organization in August of 23.
Okay. That was actually August.
22. It was August of 22.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move down to the telephone line. So you see that going from $15,500 to $13,500. That reduction of $2,000 essentially accounts for us not having some of the desk phones that we had over there in our conference rooms. We didn't bring them over here for conference rooms. But I am going to say there will be more costs coming related to this for our ITP that we just haven't sorted out yet. We're still in talks with Ascend on what exactly we want to do with our telephone going forward. So as of right now, our budget is, we're requesting $13,500, but I'm just going to say at some point we'll likely be coming back to you for more funds related to that. Then you can see several lines have minor changes in comparison. Staff parking, office supplies, staff training, our marketing budget. Many of those are because we're just trying to be cognizant of how we're spending money, and we're trying to just make sure that we're not going to be using more than we actually need.
Bringing your own pencils from home.
Correct. You know, and actually, when we moved, we went through a lot of stuff that we said, do we need this? You know what? Now we have a lot of pencils that we didn't realize we had. So we're really just trying to, be good stewards of taxpayer dollars with this, that we don't necessarily need to buy anything. I'm going to go down then to the professional services MIS line. So this gets a little bit tricky because this line has, you can see there on the comment on the side, it includes Telesystems, QuickBooks Online, and Grammarly. Previously, it also had things like Zoom, LogMeIn, GoDaddy. Those are all going to be phasing out in fiscal year '25. Telesystems, QuickBooks, and Grammarly is going to remain. The others are going to be phasing out. They're going to be replaced by things in the line below it, professional services miscellaneous line. And they're going to be part of the Arakita, Creatio, First American Leasing, and Meritus funds. So you can see that budget below, professional services miscellaneous has $170,855. And we have it under miscellaneous at this point because some of them still have implementation costs associated with them, so it didn't really seem right to have them up in the MIS line yet. So if you look at the very bottom line, the total budgets, fiscal year '24 budget was $5.7 million. Fiscal year '25 is $3 million. It looks like a decrease of $47 million, but I wanted to make it actual good comparison, so I factored out the legal fees and the $749,000 that we paid to Ascend for our ITP in fiscal year '24. So if you look at the very bottom line that says comparable budget,
Yeah.
it's 2.979 versus 3 million. It's actually an increase of 1.3%. But considering that our rent increased $91,000 and then you look at the overall budget increase of only $38,000, I think it's actually pretty impressive that we were able to only have a 1.3% increase request.
And with your rent, you pay for what you get.
Correct, correct. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has on this. There is a motion on page 19.
Are there any further questions for Jenny?
Thank you, Jenny, for the breakdown. And 1.3% increase is great.
Yeah.
Actually, especially.
Remarkable.
Yes.
Thank you to the entire team for making the cuts that
Yeah.
you felt like we'd still be the premier service, but at the same time, we can,
If you just look at the numbers without the explanation, you go, what? You know? But, so it was really nice to have your explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just being so intentional on being good stewards of taxpayers' money goes a long way. Even though you did just pass a levy.
Any further discussion? Any questions? We have a motion toward the top of page 19 to approve the administrative budget for the next fiscal year. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Great work.
Thank you.
Great work. Job.
I like the reduction.
And Jenny now,
We all do.
Jenny now has the subsidy schedule, which starts on page 21. And please note that you should have in front of you a one-page schedule that's actually the corrected one. So the one in your packet, the one that's stapled together, just draw a line through that. And this is the one to substitute. This is the one we're going to be talking about. There should be one at every seat. Okay?
So the subsidy schedule is the board's schedule of income and eligibility for our treatment. So this is what, if you look at the, page 22, but it's the extra handout. So this is the copay that is applicable to the services that are listed there on the handout. And it's based on the poverty guidelines that we update each year. So the only thing that has changed from, well, okay, there's two things that changed from last year. We update every single year the poverty guidelines, so it changes the monthly income amounts. We also then, this year, changed the level rider H, the hardship level. I think you guys might remember our conversations around our 120-day notices. We changed that. It was previously 250% of poverty to 350% of poverty. We brought that down from 250% to 300%. And we issued 120-day notices to our providers. We had resolution on that, and they were all in agreement to it. So the numbers that you see in the attached handout are at 300% of poverty for the level H hardship category. And there is a motion on page 21, and I can answer your questions. Oh, the difference between what was in your original packet and the attachment was we had an error in our formula, and so the family size of 9 and 10 were not properly calculated on all of them. So in the paper you got today, it has it properly calculated.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Jenny? Any further discussion about this? Entertain a motion to approve the recommendation in the middle of page 21.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Jenny, you are through.
I am.
Amy?
Good job.
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot of meat on those bones. All right, so SOS, Amy, please.
Yes, I'm on page 23. Mine might not be nearly as exciting as James was. The state opioid response carryover funds, we were notified early last month that we would be receiving $202,878.15 in SOS 3.0 carryover funds from Ohio Mass. The project dates for SOS funding are September 30th, 23 through September 29th of 24. So we don't have a lot of time to spend the funds. So taking that into consideration, we reached out to a few agencies who would be able to spend the funds in that short amount of time, enhancing the programs that are already funded through SOS dollars. So with that, we are proposing to fund 3 separate programs, enhancing the programs, I should say, that are already funded. The first 2 are programs funded by agencies that support pregnant moms and their families. So the first one is called the Mother and Child Dependency Program, and it's a program through Mercy. And the second one is the Chrysalis program through Harbor. So they're essentially going to be using the funds the same way, and that is to purchase supplies for the moms and the families. And so supplies meaning car seats, strollers, diapers, things along those lines. Mercy projected being able to spend $33,804, and then Harbor projected to being able to spend $99,074 and 15 cents. So that will be the first 2 programs. And then the third program is through the health department. They currently oversee and manage a naloxone vending machine in the county jail that has been very successful for the community. So they are requesting to purchase 3 new naloxone vending machines that will house harm reduction supplies in the community. So they will find locations in the community, they will stock the vending machines, and then they will manage and provide maintenance for those machines from here on out. And they requested $70,000 to do that. So the vending machines will hold naloxone and fentanyl strips, and then if there are other harm reduction type supplies, they'll they will use those as well for the vending machines. So there are 3 motions, 1 for each agency, 1 for us to accept the carryover award from Ohio Mass, and then the first one is to allocate the funds to Harbor, Mercy, and then the health department.
How expensive are the items in the vending machine?
They're free.
They're free?
Yes.
Can we have one in Maumee Court, please?
Well, I can connect you with the health department as well.
They're looking for sites now.
They are looking for sites now.
How do they define the sites? Is there like a certain level of drug activity in that area or what?
High-risk populations. So
Okay.
the one in the jail, I'm sorry, Amy, you want to answer that?
No, you're
The one in the jail is because people, that's literally the highest risk population for overdose and death. You get in jail, you end up detoxing, and you're coming out, and you have a choice, right? You either go into treatment, you go find your new dealer, or you.
Sure.
And if you go find your dealer and you end up using again, you're at high risk for overdose because you've detoxed a little bit, and then pushes you over. So they're encouraging people to stop at the vending machine and get a dose of naloxone and other support and service items as they exit. And of course, all of this is designed to create a relationship with individuals who don't have a relationship with treatment, to move them into treatment services.
Absolutely. You guys may not know the answer to this, but how do you get that information out to the people who need it the most?
They're in court or they're in jail.
I mean, and then that's how they know about the vending machines?
Well, the NOS program through the health department, the Northwest Ohio Syringe Services Program, they're out in the community, so they're spreading the word throughout all of their community outreach events. And then there's also other groups, social media groups and such that they're connected with, and they get the word out that way.
Have you ever seen their van?
How wonderful that we
I
have
have.
programs in our community, that we were able to take this money and fund it right away.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we somehow have identification on these machines of the board.
That's a
You
good
know what I'm
question.
saying? Do
I
we have our
understand.
logo on them?
That's a good
Yeah,
question.
that is a good question. I don't know off the top
And
of my
if we
head.
don't, it ought to
We
be
will by the
there.
end of the week.
Yeah.
I would
Faith will
like
run
to
down
think
there
we
and
do,
slap a
but-
sticker right on
Yeah, if we don't.
Every
it-
diaper will have one of them.
And it should be prominent, it should be prominently displayed.
We work very well with the health department in collaboration, so if you've ever seen their van, our logo is all over that van as well, so I'm sure that if it's not on there, it's an easy fix.
And even with these other supplies, somehow we ought to be identified as channeling funds.
So, that goes back to every agency in our funded network has the requirement that they put our logo on the front door, right? So when you come in, you see our logo. And then any of their advertising for things that we support, they have to follow our logo policy. And they do quite a good job of doing that.
Yeah, I just think it's nice if we're buying car seats that's somewhere, because then we not only reach people that come in the door, we reach the grandparents, the aunties, the whoever that handle that infant in that situation.
That might be kind of tricky to do, but.
Well, I mean,
we could-
I guess you see my point.
Yeah.
But,
Our
Whatever.
manager of communications is listening intently and
yeah, I mean,
taking notes.
yeah, we need to toot our own horn.
Chrysalis, I think, already has our logo on it.
Oh, absolutely,
So
yeah.
that's where you get the car seats and stuff.
Yeah, but sometimes I think you do the work and you just, and people don't know that you're doing the work.
Right,
So,
right, especially since we're doing taxes.
Yeah.
I should see it.
I do have confirmation that it is on the vending machine at the jail. I just messaged Maj real quick, who oversees the program, and she did verify
Okay,
that.
so, yeah, perfect.
It's proof of performance is what it is,
Yeah,
it's proof of
absolutely.
performance, it's showing the community
You test for
Tax
fentanyl,
dollars.
that
fentanyl's in.
their tax dollars at work.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions for Amy on this? Just a
point.
clarification, I'm assuming that the FFY is the federal
Federal fiscal
fiscal
year.
year? Yeah. Okay. All right, I think we can take these three motions together, if
Just a
anyone would be move to approve.
Should we have the motions be to accept the funds as a separate motion and then allocate as three separate, or, because the format just doesn't.
We've done it this format before, but if you want
I
to do a
defer
revision of the
to
change.
our doctor's attorneys on the board.
We have typically integrated into a
Okay.
single motion, at least in one of them, so I mean.
It's only a little awkward because we've got two others here.
Yeah, that's-
It's just the
yeah.
one. Yeah, I see your point. I think we're okay. though.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anyone like to move for approval of the motions in the middle of page 23?
So,
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motions, all three motions carried. Amy, you've got the Recovery Housing Program next.
Yep, on the bottom of page 23 there, Ohio Must issued an RFI, request for information, several weeks ago regarding programming for recovery housing funding. We responded to the RFI and were informed that we are being awarded $860,954, which was a nice surprise, in recovery housing funds. So the funds have to be used for new adults living in recovery housing, and the recovery housing has to be certified according to the standards set by Ohio MHRSB. So we are requesting to establish a pool of funds for any of our existing agencies who are currently contracted through a provider agreement or funded through state opioid response funds, to be able to access that pool of funds for reimbursement for new individuals moving into the recovery housing for the remainder of this fiscal year as well as into fiscal year 25. So the allocation that Ohio MHRSB is providing is good currently, and then for fiscal year 25 as well. So there is a motion on page 24 to accept the allocation and then also to establish that pool of funds.
So moved.
Is there any further discussion or questions for Amy about this motion?
Do you have a list of those places that are certified?
We do.
I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay.
Is it on our app yet? Our recovery house is on our app yet?
Yeah, they are on the app.
So who certifies them, OMOS?
Ohio MHRSB.
Yeah.
National Association of Recovery Residences, NARS, the short term, there's 3 or 4 different levels.
They provide the standards.
Yeah, Ohio Revised Code language changed last year that said boards and/or the state cannot fund recovery housing anywhere that isn't certified by one of several different organizations.
Great, okay. We have a motion and a second, I believe. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, the murdered children additional allocation, Amy?
Yes, on page 24. Last year, June of last year, you all approved $120,000 from the City of Toledo ARPA funds to increase capacity for trauma and grief support groups for this current fiscal year. One of the programs funded through that allocation is the Northwest Ohio chapter of Parents of Murdered Children. They were awarded an allocation of $15,000 to increase access to support groups for families impacted by gun violence. They've done great work over the last year supporting those efforts, and they've spent all of their allocations. So they are requesting an additional allocation of $10,000 for the remainder of the fiscal year. So the City of Toledo ARPA funds, we had some unspent funds in the category for the mental wellness and rapid response team allocation. We provided training for that group, and with those unspent funds, then we're asking to use those funds for the Parents of Murdered Children entity. Mostly, they've identified the need for when there is a death in a home, a murder in a home, there is a cleanup that has to happen through like a hazardous company, and that is an expense that families have to take on themselves. So they have used these funds to help support families in that cleanup effort. They actually call it a blessing cleaning. And then many times also the families wish to be relocated temporarily to a hotel or something while that takes place. So they've used these funds to support those families in that way, as well as several other efforts that they've done over the last year. So we are requesting an increase in their allocation from $15,000 to $25,000 to be spent for the remainder of this fiscal year.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Seems like a no-brainer. And these are unspent ARPA funds? Correct. All right. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Amy. Scott, you want to talk about Danny's Place?
Sure. I got the easy job. So these guys carried all the heavy load this week and weeks prior. So let's talk about Danny's Place a little bit. So NAC is our architectural and engineering firm that we entered into a contract with some time ago for a total amount of $743,700. As you recall, we went through an extensive design process. We designed a facility that came out to be about $14 million to build. And then we went through a process of cost reduction. So redesigning the facility to get down to a reasonable cost that we could afford. There was an expense related to doing that service and redoing all the plans, redoing all the plumbing and engineering, electrical and all that, redoing the drawings, and then redoing where needed permitting. That cost to NAC was $129,750, which was not included in the original contract. But that cost also related to or resulted in reducing the build cost by $3 million down to the $11,051,000 amount that I quoted you guys last month, sorry. So what we're proposing is permission to increase NAC's contract by that amount of $129,750. What I want you to know about that, though, is it won't increase the overall cost of the $11,051,047 because the $129,750 was already included in that when I reported it to you last month. So it's a neutral amount, but I just need permission to increase the contract. And there is a motion on the middle of page 25, but before you consider that, I also wanted you to be aware that the same thing happened with the H-Plex owner's agreement or owner's representative contract. That's actually increased by $30,000, but we don't need your permission for that because you've already approved up to $275,000 for the owner's rep contract, and we're well below that right now.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions for Scott?
Before you vote, I'd like to give you some information on the site itself. By the end of this week, you will see a project trailer on the lot at Arlington. Next week, you will start to see stakes in the ground where they will actually do the footprint of the building and the footings and all of that stuff. The week after, there will be a bulldozer moving dirt. And once again, June 10th, 11 o'clock, that'll be the groundbreaking that we're scheduled. So there's a lot of progress moving on the project.
And you'll let us know when the groundbreaking.
June 10th, 11 a.m., I'll certainly send out
You'll remind me.
much more than that. Absolutely. You won't be able to forget about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How nice.
Let me ask a question that I think I know the answer to. That when NAC was doing the original design, they were following what we had asked them to do. In other words, they weren't designing a Cadillac when we were asking them for an Oldsmobile.
That is very correct. There was a committee made up of the owner's rep, NAC reps. There were a few of you that participated now and again in that committee. Board staff, the Hecks, Jeff and Donna Heck, who Danny's parents, and then NAMI Ohio representatives. We all went through this design process together and said, yes, we want this, we like this, we like this, we like that. And then what we did was we gave that to our general contractor, Lathrop, and they went, all right, here's the estimates for what you want. It'll likely cost you $14 million. And I went, we don't have $14 million, let's go through a redesign process.
Okay, so it certainly wasn't NAC's fault.
Oh, absolutely not, no.
Yeah,
No.
good. All right, just to be clear. All right, so we have a motion and a second. The motion itself is actually in the middle of page 25, and you see a number there, 873, which I take it is the addition of the 129 to the 743.
That is correct.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, you've got ARPA Part 2, Scott.
ARPA Part 2, okay, so these are Ohio Moss Regional ARPA 2 funds. Harbor is eligible to receive $1,079,809 of regional ARPA 2 funds. They were originally allocated through the region to Seneca, Sandusky, Wyandotte, Ottawa Board for the building of the Child and Adolescent Crisis Stabilization Unit at Harbor in Lucas County. Harbor has since identified that project isn't feasible and is requesting to redesign the project to support people that are showing up for their urgent care on Woodley. Specifically, they want to design 2 spaces, an additional treatment space for outpatient detox services, including restrooms, and a medical clinic where youth can be assessed for minor health issues and adults can receive some primary care, associated restrooms, medication, and exam rooms. In order for the project to proceed, our board, because it's being built in Lucas County, has been requested to pass the following resolution like we do with all capital project grants. Committing that we'll agree to monitor the operations of the project, which we do, cooperate with Ohio Moss in seeking development alternative use for the project in the event Harbor's default, which is very highly unlikely. And then authorize me to execute the agreements, which is usually just a sign off on the lease agreement that is made between Harbor, us, and Ohio Moss.
So we have a motion toward the bottom of page 25 to implement that, basically to approve Harbor getting this money for that purpose, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any questions for Scott? Any discussion about this motion?
I do have a question. Agrees to annually monitor the operations of the project. Does that mean we are annually into perpetuity agreeing to monitor Harbor's operation of these facilities?
Thank you for that. It comes up quite often, right? What's our scope? They usually have, for community capital grants, they usually have a 30-year lien on the property. ARPA 2 are only 10-year liens. So we will we'll be a party to that lease agreement, or whatever they want to call it, a capital agreement, that identifies us as providing that monitoring for the capital period of 10 years.
Any further questions or discussion?
Reading this as well, seeking about developing alternative uses if the project somehow does something. What does that mean?
Oh, that's a great question as well. So, let's say they default on the project. The building is still there, right? And it still has a Ohio Moss lien on the project.
But it's owned by Harbor.
Right. So Ohio Moss would be seeking our input on what is the best solution to use that for a behavioral health service. It comes up more often on if a facility is sold. So let's say Harbor decides to sell the Woodley building. Whatever portion of the lien hasn't been forgiven up to that point has to be repaid to Ohio Mass. Typically, that money goes into an escrow account for a facility in Lucas County for us to designate at a later date. That happens more routinely than somebody just defaulting on a building.
Okay?
What does it mean adults can receive primary care?
So the new model that our community mental health centers are moving towards is called, and I always butcher the acronym, CCBHC, Community Whatever, help me.
It is CCBHC.
Somebody Google it.
It's
Behavioral health care is the last.
Behavioral health.
It's an integrated behavioral health, physical health care model.
So they're going in there for a sore throat?
Could be.
Are they to be affiliated with, I mean, they're there for Harbor for other things, or they just walk in like an urgent care?
Well, it's
Like
urgent
over-
psychiatric care, so people are moving there, but they'll also have an associated
Okay.
primary care. And they will have a primary care doc, they have, or a physician assistant, they will have, Harbor and Zeph Center already have. Harbor has the CCBHC grant already, and so does Zeph. Zeph actually just passed their review to become a FQHC lookalike. That's where the community mental health agencies are moving towards, is integration of behavioral and physical health care.
So needed. So needed.
It is so needed, because once, you know, a patient or a client of one of these facilities builds trust with that facility, going to that location, they go back to that location for everything.
Right.
That's where they're comfortable, that's where they feel safest, right? And so it's a great model to be able to say, hey, you know, while you're here, let's check your blood pressure. Let's make sure that the medicines you're taking aren't interacting with these medicines over here and whatnot. So it's,
Not only that, it reduces the cost of ER visits. You know, people go to, a lot of times you find certain communities going to ER for a sore throat, things like that.
And I suppose one of the concerns, or at least things to be aware of in the future, is to make sure that we, as a mental health board, don't get out over our skis and put ourselves in a position of supervising or you know, having some control over the physical health aspect of it, right?
Absolutely, nobody wants us to be in that ballpark, and there's no way that they can actually bill for physical health services because of the way our billing process works.
All right. I think we have a motion and a second for the Harbor motion, which is recommended toward the bottom of page 25. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And then you have the final, you're going to approve our charter.
Yeah, just a little housekeeping, right? It's been a while since we've seen the charter. It's supposed to be reviewed every 2 years. It was last reviewed in December of 2022, so we're well within the time frame. But just wanted to get it out in front of you guys. We're not recommending any changes to it. We made a few changes, you know, in December of 22. It's still working. I think the committee structure's working. We're getting good representation here, you know, in our committees. And as evidenced by the fact that we still hold quorums routinely. And so board staff are not making any recommendations to changing the charter, but we are requesting that you approve it.
Any questions? Any discussion? Entertain a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, we're ready for open session. Richard, would you like to start?
Just a couple of things from one government center. April the 25th, the safety committee met. It did not go well. There was yelling, there was screaming, there was crying, there was finger pointing, and Chief Friendly and his officers got an earful. And among the many things they heard was, you don't do enough to accommodate the needs of people with mental illness and substance abuse. He didn't disagree. So we'll keep up on that. Last week at a gender review, they were looking at the shot spotter program. This is where Toledo Police have the technology to find out where a shot was fired. They didn't go looking for somebody to, find out where the shot came from. They were put on notice that many of the council members are unhappy with this. This is nationwide. Las Vegas and Philadelphia say it's a great program. We've seen a noticeable reduction in homicide, but places like Chicago say no, it leads to civil rights violations. So a number of the council members spoke up on it last week, and though they will continue funding it, they put TPD on notice. We're not happy with it. You need to come up with some statistics or something, because in the near future they may pull their funding for that. A couple of weeks ago, you're familiar with the expansion of Cherry Street Mission. This is the 2 blocks that are right next to it, the 1400 block, which is owned by the county commissioners, and the 1500 block owned by Cherry Street, and they're going to put a very large facility there. All of it was all ready to go. The zoning was all ready to go. And when I look on the bulletin board down at one government center, I see that it's all ready to go. But when I get to the meeting 2 weeks ago, no, they've only got 1 on the agenda. Now, this isn't rocket science. I mean, everything's numbered. It goes from 193 to 195. Apparently, they're not proofreading their agendas. Of the 12 council members, none of them caught it. Nobody said, hey, what happened to 194? I stayed after the meeting. I talked to everybody I could find. I couldn't get a straight answer. They said, yeah, we've got to approve the other one too. This brings back bad memories. For anybody that doesn't remember, 1995, Sparrow's Nest was ready to open. City Council screwed up on the special use permit, didn't follow Toledo Municipal Code. Old West End Association took it to court, delayed this for months. They could have been helping people a lot sooner. I told them, you've got to pay more attention to this. And remember, this facility that we're talking about, it's only half a block from school. That is one of the many reasons that people oppose facilities like this. It's close proximity to children. So I have talked to both the county commissioners who are involved in this project and city council, and asked them in the future, would you please pay more attention to these zoning issues? They haunt you at a later date. And so tomorrow, after they'll approve the second lot that they should have approved 2 weeks ago, and hopefully everything will go smoothly from that point on. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone else in the audience like to speak? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
David? Yes, sir.